The courthouse steps in Bakersfield were cracked and weathered, just like Maya's heart as she stood there in a thrift store dress that barely fit, watching her stepmother Diane smirk with satisfaction. This wasn't supposed to be a real wedding. It was supposed to be the final crushing blow to destroy what little self-worth Maya had left. Diane had found the perfect weapon. Jake Reaper Morrison, a leather-clad Hell's Angel with prison tattoos and a reputation that made grown men cross the street. What Diane didn't know was that beneath Maya's quiet exterior lived the brilliant mind of a former MIT scholarship student who'd lost everything when her father died. She'd hidden her intelligence, her dreams, her very soul to survive in Diane's house of cruelty. As Jake's motorcycle rumbled up to the courthouse, Maya braced for humiliation. But when their eyes met, something impossible happened. The dangerous stranger looked at her like she was precious, like she was worth protecting, like she was beautiful. In that moment, Maya realized her stepmother's cruelest joke might just become her greatest salvation. But what happens when a broken girl meets a man who spent his life running from love? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya tugged at the hem of her dress, the pale yellow fabric straining against her curves. The seams threatened to split with each nervous breath. She'd lost weight these past months. Stress had a way of killing appetite, but Diane had deliberately chosen the smallest size she could find at Goodwill. "Stop fidgeting," Diane hissed, her manicured nails digging into Maya's arm. "You look pathetic enough without squirming like a worm." The motorcycle engine cut off with a final growl. Maya watched as Jake Morrison swung his leg over the massive Harley, his movements fluid despite his intimidating size. He had to be at least 6'4", with shoulders that strained against his leather jacket. Prison tattoos snaked up his neck, disappearing into dark hair that needed a trim. This was Diane's masterstroke. After months of psychological torture following Maya's father's death, this public humiliation would be the final nail in the coffin. Diane had met Jake through her boyfriend Rick, who owed the Hell's Angels money he couldn't pay. The solution was elegant in its cruelty. Jake needed a green card marriage to avoid deportation to Canada, and Diane needed Maya gone from her life forever. $5,000 to marry the fat girl and take her off my hands, Diane had told Rick. Tell your biker friend it's a business transaction. He doesn't have to touch her. Maya had overheard every word through the thin walls of the house that used to be her sanctuary. She'd lain in her childhood bed, staring at MIT acceptance letters she'd hidden in her desk drawer, letters that meant nothing now without the trust fund Diane had somehow convinced the lawyers to freeze. But now, watching Jake approach the courthouse steps, Maya felt something shift inside her chest. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't sneering or looking disgusted. His dark eyes were fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell leather and motor oil and something indefinably masculine. Up close, she could see the tattoos weren't just prison ink. There was real artistry in the Celtic knots that wound around his forearms, the detailed raven spread across his knuckles. "You Maya?" His voice was rough, like gravel and whiskey. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "You sure you want to do this?" Jake asked quietly. His eyes never left her face, and Maya realized with shock that he wasn't asking about the legal arrangements. He was asking if she was being coerced. "She's sure," Diane interjected, stepping closer. "We've got the license, we've got the witnesses. Let's get this over with." Jake's jaw tightened as he looked at Diane for the first time. Maya watched his expression darken, taking in Diane's designer clothes, her perfect makeup, the way she stood apart from Maya like she was contaminated. "I wasn't talking to you, lady." Jake's voice carried the kind of quiet menace that made smart people back down. "Maya, you got somewhere else to go after this?" The simple question nearly broke her. When was the last time someone had asked about her welfare? When had anyone cared where she went or what happened to her? "She'll figure it out," Diane said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. Jake turned back to Maya, and she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Kindness. It was buried deep beneath layers of hardness and pain, but it was there. "What's your favorite color?" he asked suddenly. Maya blinked, confused. "What? Your favorite color? Humor me." "Blue," she whispered. "Deep blue, like the ocean at midnight." Jake smiled then, just a slight curve of his lips, but it transformed his entire face. "Mine too." He held out his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. "Ready to go get married, Maya?" The sound of Harley engines rumbling to life echoed through the morning air as Sophia pressed her face against her bedroom window. 3 motorcycles were parked in the driveway below, their chrome gleaming in the sunlight. Her stepmother's laughter drifted up from the front porch, shrill and calculating. "Oh, this is perfect," Victoria's voice carried clearly. "She's going to absolutely die when she meets him." Sophia's stomach churned. She'd heard whispers all week about some arrangement Victoria had made, some new form of torment disguised as an opportunity. The cruel smile that had played on her stepmother's lips for days suggested whatever was coming would be particularly devastating. A knock at her door made her jump. "Sophia, darling, come down. We have guests." Victoria's sickeningly sweet tone meant trouble. With trembling hands, Sophia smoothed down her oversized sweater and took a deep breath. Whatever humiliation awaited her downstairs, she'd face it with as much dignity as she could muster. She'd survived 3 years of Victoria's psychological warfare. She could survive this too. The moment she stepped into the living room, 3 pairs of eyes turned toward her. 2 men flanked the couch, both wearing leather jackets that had seen better days. But it was the man in the center who made her breath catch. He was massive, easily 6'3", with shoulders that strained against his black t-shirt. Intricate tattoos covered his arms like living artwork, and his dark hair was pulled back in a way that emphasized the sharp angles of his face. Everything about him screamed danger, from his steel-toed boots to the silver chain hanging from his belt. This had to be Marcus Steele. Even his name sounded like a weapon. "Sophia, sweetheart, I'd like you to meet your fiancé," Victoria announced, her voice dripping with false enthusiasm. The word hit Sophia like a physical blow. "Fiancé?" Her legs wobbled, and she gripped the doorframe for support. Marcus stood slowly, his movements fluid despite his intimidating size. When their eyes met, Sophia felt something unexpected. Not the disgust or pity she'd braced herself for, but curiosity. His gaze held hers steadily, neither mocking nor dismissive. "Hello, Sophia," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent an odd shiver down her spine. Victoria clapped her hands together. "Isn't this wonderful? Marcus has agreed to marry you next month. His situation requires a wife, and well, we both know your options are rather limited." The cruel implication hung in the air like poison gas. Sophia's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she forced herself to remain standing. She wouldn't give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. "I see," Sophia managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stepped closer, and she caught a hint of leather and something clean, soap, maybe pine. "Could I speak with my fiancé alone?" he asked, but it wasn't really a question. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, I don't think that's alone." The single word carried enough weight to make Victoria's objections die in her throat. The 3 visitors filed out, Victoria shooting Sophia a warning look that clearly said, "Don't screw this up." The front door closed with a decisive click, leaving them in sudden, overwhelming silence. Sophia stared at her hands, waiting for him to say something cruel, to confirm every horrible thing Victoria had undoubtedly told him about her. Instead, she heard the soft creak of leather as he sat down on the couch. "This wasn't your idea, was it?" he asked quietly. The gentleness in his tone surprised her into looking up. He was watching her with those dark eyes, and there was something almost protective in his expression. "No," she admitted. "I didn't even know about it until just now." He nodded slowly. "Your stepmother painted quite a picture." Said you were desperate to get married, willing to take anyone." His lips curved in what might have been amusement. "She also said you were hideous and stupid." Got that part wrong, didn't she? Sophia blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry?" "You heard me." Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Lady's got eyes like a bat if she thinks you're anything close to hideous." Heat flooded Sophia's cheeks, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. No one had ever called her beautiful, not even close. "You don't have to be kind. I know what this is." "Do you?" He tilted his head. "Because I'm not sure either of us knows what this is yet." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She'd expected mockery, maybe pity, possibly disgust. She hadn't expected him to talk to her like she was an actual person whose thoughts and feelings mattered. "Why did you agree to this?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Let's just say your stepmother offered something I need and I offered something she wanted gone." The bluntness should have hurt, but somehow it didn't. At least he was being honest. The motorcycle's engine died with a final rumble in front of the courthouse, leaving an uncomfortable silence between Mia and Jake. She'd spent the entire 20-minute ride pressed against his leather jacket, her arms wrapped around his waist, trying not to think about how solid and warm he felt beneath her touch. Now, as she climbed off the bike and straightened her simple blue dress, reality crashed down like a ton of bricks. "So," Jake said, pulling off his helmet and running a hand through his dark hair, "marriage license first, then the ceremony?" Mia nodded, her throat suddenly dry. "I guess so. I don't really know how this works." "Makes two of us." He studied her face with those intense green eyes. "You sure about this? We could always tell your stepmother to go to hell and call it a day." For a moment, Mia was tempted. The way he said it, so matter-of-factly, as if standing up to Vivian was the easiest thing in the world. But then she thought about her father's medical bills, the house that would be lost, the trust fund that would remain forever out of reach. "No, I need to do this," she said quietly. Jake's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "All right then, let's get married." The courthouse clerk looked like she'd seen everything twice, but even she did a double-take when Jake and Mia approached her window. Her eyes traveled from Mia's nervous smile to Jake's leather jacket and visible tattoos, then back again. "Marriage license?" the clerk asked in a bored tone. "Yes, please," Mia managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The paperwork was surprisingly simple. Name, age, address, any previous marriages, check no for both of them. When Jake wrote down his occupation as motorcycle mechanic, Mia felt a small flutter of curiosity. There was so much she didn't know about this man she was about to marry. "Witnesses?" the clerk asked. They looked at each other blankly. In all of Vivian's careful orchestration of this humiliation, she'd apparently forgotten that detail. "We can grab someone from the hallway," Jake suggested. "People do it all the time here." And that's how Mia found herself standing in front of a justice of the peace with two complete strangers as witnesses, a woman waiting for traffic court and a man who'd been there to pay a parking ticket. The whole situation was so absurd that Mia had to bite her lip to keep from laughing hysterically. "Do you, Jacob Michael Steele, take Amelia Rose Patterson to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Jake's voice was steady, certain, and when he said it, he was looking directly into Mia's eyes. "Do you, Amelia Rose Patterson, take Jacob Michael Steele to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The words stuck in her throat for a moment. This wasn't how she'd imagined her wedding day as a little girl. No white dress, no flowers, no family who actually cared about her happiness. Just a quick ceremony with a stranger, while her stepmother's cruel laughter echoed in her memory. "I do," she whispered. "You may kiss the bride." Panic flashed across both their faces. They'd been so focused on just getting through the ceremony that they hadn't considered this part. Jake stepped closer, his hands gentle as they cupped her face. "Just for show," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. But when his lips touched hers, soft and surprisingly tender, it didn't feel like show. It felt like something real, something that made her heart skip and her cheeks flush pink. The kiss lasted only a few seconds, but when they pulled apart, something had shifted between them. "Congratulations," the justice of the peace said, completely oblivious to the small earthquake that had just occurred. "You're now husband and wife." Outside the courthouse, they stood by Jake's motorcycle in awkward silence. The afternoon sun cast everything in golden light, making the whole surreal experience feel like a dream. "So," Jake said finally, "I guess we should figure out what happens next." Mia twisted the simple gold band on her finger. They'd grabbed matching rings from the courthouse gift shop. "Vivian will want proof that we actually went through with it. The marriage certificate, maybe some photos, and then—" She looked up at him, this stranger who was now legally her husband. "I honestly don't know. I didn't think past this moment." Jake was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "You hungry?" he asked finally. The question caught her off guard. "What?" "It's past noon, and I'm betting you didn't eat breakfast. I know a place that makes the best burgers in town. Figured maybe we could grab some food and, I don't know, talk about this mess we've gotten ourselves into." Despite everything, Mia found herself smiling. "You want to take me out to eat? On our wedding day?" "Why not?" Jake's mouth quirked upward. "Might be the most normal thing that's happened today." The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Meredith's bedroom as she stared at her reflection in the antique mirror. 3 days. 3 days until she would be married to a complete stranger, and despite her stepmother's cruel intentions, something had shifted after yesterday's coffee shop encounter. Jake Morrison wasn't the monster she'd expected, but that only made everything more complicated. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. "Meredith, darling, we have appointments today." Victoria's saccharine voice carried through the door like poisoned honey. The next few hours blurred together in a whirlwind of wedding preparations that felt more like torture. Victoria dragged her from the florist to the caterer to the church, making decisions without consulting Meredith once. At the bridal shop, things reached their peak cruelty. "We'll need your largest size," Victoria announced loudly to the sales associate, her voice carrying across the boutique. "My stepdaughter has quite the substantial figure." Meredith's cheeks burned as other customers turned to stare. She wanted to disappear into the ornate carpet beneath her feet. Actually, the kind-eyed sales associate said diplomatically, "Let me take some measurements to ensure the perfect fit." 20 minutes later, Meredith stood before a three-way mirror in a dress that, while beautiful, felt like a costume for someone else's life. The ivory satin clung in unflattering ways, and the sweetheart neckline seemed designed for a different body entirely. "It'll have to do," Victoria sighed dramatically. "We don't have time for alterations." As they left the shop, Meredith spotted a familiar figure across the street. Jake leaned against his motorcycle outside a small diner, talking on his phone. He looked up at exactly the wrong moment, catching sight of her emerging from the bridal boutique. Their eyes met through the busy street traffic, and something passed between them. An acknowledgement of the surreal situation they'd both been thrust into. Victoria noticed nothing, already heading toward their next destination. That evening, Meredith sat in her room picking at dinner when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Hope it's okay, I got your number from my dad. This is Jake. Would you like to take a drive tomorrow? Seems like we should talk before Saturday." She stared at the message for 10 minutes before typing back, "Okay." The next day, Jake arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, but instead of his motorcycle, he drove up in a borrowed pickup truck. Meredith appreciated the thoughtfulness. She'd been wondering how exactly one rode on a motorcycle in a dress. "Figured we'd both be more comfortable this way," he said, as she climbed into the passenger seat. "Plus, I wanted to be able to actually hear you when we talk." They drove in surprisingly comfortable silence through the winding roads outside town. Jake seemed to know exactly where he was going, finally pulling over at a scenic overlook that provided a breathtaking view of the valley below. "Listen," he began, turning to face her, "I know this whole thing is insane. My dad's made it clear I don't have much choice in the matter, and I'm guessing your situation isn't much different." Meredith nodded, grateful for his directness. "My stepmother has made it very clear what she thinks of me. This marriage is her idea of the ultimate punishment." Jake's jaw tightened. "She sounds like a real piece of work." "That's putting it mildly." Meredith found herself laughing, surprised by her own boldness. "She's been trying to get rid of me since she married my father. I suppose marrying me off to someone she considers equally undesirable kills two birds with one stone." "Undesirable?" Jake raised an eyebrow, and Meredith caught something flickering in his expression she couldn't quite read. "Well, you know." She gestured vaguely at herself, then at his leather jacket and visible tattoos. "We don't exactly fit the country club image she's going for." Jake was quiet for a long moment, studying the horizon. "Can I tell you something? Yesterday at the coffee shop was the first time in months someone talked to me like I was actually human, not some dangerous criminal or walking mistake." The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. "What do you mean?" "Everyone sees the tattoos, the bike, the reputation, and they decide who I am before I even open my mouth. But you actually listened when I talked about books. You didn't flinch when I reached for my wallet. You treated me like a person." Meredith felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. "Maybe that's because I know what it's like to be judged before people get to know you." They sat in companionable silence as the afternoon sun painted the valley in golden hues. Neither of them mentioned Saturday's approaching wedding, but the unspoken understanding hung between them. Whatever happened in 2 days, they would face it together. As Jake started the truck for the drive home, Meredith realized something had fundamentally changed. This wasn't just about survival anymore. The diner buzzed with the usual morning crowd, but Lily felt like she was sitting in a fishbowl. Every few minutes someone would glance over at their corner booth, whispering behind coffee cups and over plates of eggs. She hunched her shoulders, trying to make herself smaller, but Marcus noticed immediately. "Hey," he said softly, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "You okay?" The simple contact sent electricity up her arm. 3 days had passed since their impromptu ice cream adventure, and she still couldn't believe this was real. Marcus had texted her yesterday asking if she wanted to grab breakfast before he had to open the shop, and despite every rational voice in her head screaming warnings, she'd said yes. "Just ignore them," she murmured, pulling her hand back to fidget with her napkin. "I'm used to it." Marcus's jaw tightened as he followed her gaze to a table of women who quickly looked away when they noticed him staring. "Well, I'm not used to it, and I don't like it. Marcus, please don't." But he was already standing, walking over to the gossiping table with that easy confidence that seemed to follow him everywhere. Lily watched in horror as he leaned down, his voice too low for her to hear but his meaning crystal clear from the way the women's faces went pale. When he returned, sliding back into the booth like nothing had happened, the whispering had stopped entirely. "What did you say to them?" Lily asked, torn between mortification and curiosity. A slow grin spread across his face. "Just suggested they might want to focus on their own business instead of ours." "Ours?" The word slipped out before she could stop it, loaded with more hope than she'd intended. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, becoming more serious. "Yeah, ours. Unless you don't want there to be an ours." The honest vulnerability in his voice made her chest tight. She'd spent so many years convinced that no one would ever want her, that any attention was either pity or a cruel joke. But when Marcus looked at her like this, like she was something precious, it was getting harder to maintain those walls. "I don't understand you," she admitted quietly. "Why are you being so nice to me?" "Nice?" Marcus laughed, but it wasn't mocking. "Lily, I'm not being nice. I'm being selfish as hell." "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "I mean, I can't stop thinking about you. About how you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating on a book, or how you light up when you talk about something you were passionate about, or how you tried to protect a complete stranger from what you thought was a terrible situation." He paused, running a hand through his hair. I mean, I've been going out of my mind, trying to figure out how to convince you to give me a real chance. Lily's breath caught. Marcus? I know what people think when they see me, he continued. The tattoos, the bike, the reputation. Hell, half of it's probably deserved. But when I'm with you, I feel like maybe I could be better than all that. The sincerity in his voice was overwhelming. Lily had always been good at reading people, a survival skill developed from years of navigating her stepmother's moods, and everything about Marcus screamed genuine. But that almost made it worse, because it meant she had to consider the possibility that this wasn't some elaborate prank. You don't know me, she whispered. Not really. Then let me, he said simply. Let me know you. The waitress chose that moment to appear with their food, breaking the intensity of the moment. As she set down plates and refilled coffee cups, Lily tried to gather her scattered thoughts. When they were alone again, Marcus didn't push, just started eating his pancakes like he hadn't just turned her world upside down. My stepmother arranged this, Lily said suddenly, the words tumbling out. The marriage thing. She thought it would be the ultimate humiliation, forcing the fat girl to marry the scary biker. Marcus went very still, his fork halfway to his mouth. She thought I was scary. Despite everything, Lily almost smiled. She thought you were dangerous. A punishment. And what do you think? Lily studied his face, the sharp angles softened by genuinely kind eyes, the careful way he moved around her like she might bolt at any moment, the patience he'd shown even when she'd been convinced he was the enemy. I think, she said slowly, that you're the most dangerous man I've ever met. His eyebrows shot up in surprise, maybe hurt, but she continued. Because you make me want things I've never let myself want before. You make me think that maybe... She took a shaky breath. Maybe I deserve something good. The smile that spread across Marcus's face was radiant, transforming his entire expression. Lily Morrison, he said, you deserve everything good, and I'd really like to be the one to prove it to you. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Jake's apartment as Maya stirred awake on the couch, momentarily forgetting where she was. The events of the previous night came flooding back. The wedding, the ride through the city, Jake's unexpected gentleness. She could hear movement in the kitchen and smell coffee brewing. Good morning, sunshine, Jake called out, appearing in the doorway with 2 steaming mugs. His hair was tousled from sleep, and he wore a simple grey t-shirt that somehow made him look less intimidating than his leather jacket had. Hope you like it strong. I don't really do fancy coffee. Maya accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping her fingers around its warmth. Thank you. For everything. I should probably figure out what happens next. Jake settled into the armchair across from her, his expression serious. What do you want to happen next? The question caught her off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked what she wanted? I honestly don't know. I've never really had choices before. Where you've got them now. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Look, I know this whole situation is crazy. Your stepmother thought she was playing some sick joke, but maybe we can turn the tables on her. Maya raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? A mischievous grin spread across Jake's face. What if we actually made this work? Not for real, necessarily, but enough to drive her absolutely insane. You get your freedom. I get to mess with someone who clearly deserves it, and we both buy some time to figure things out. You want to fake being married? Why not? You're legally stuck with me for a while anyway, and I'm betting your stepmother expects this whole thing to crash and burn within days. Imagine her face when we show up somewhere together, acting like the happy couple. Maya found herself laughing despite everything. You're completely insane. Maybe, but I'm also right. Besides, you're interesting, Maya. Most people take one look at me and either run away or want something from me. You just rolled with it. That's pretty cool. Heat crept up Maya's neck at the compliment. She wasn't used to being called interesting, let alone cool. I don't know the first thing about being someone's fake wife. Lucky for you, I don't know much about being a fake husband either. We'll figure it out as we go. Jake stood up and headed back to the kitchen. But first, breakfast. Can't plot revenge on an empty stomach. As Jake rummaged through his refrigerator, Maya took in her surroundings properly for the first time. The apartment was small but surprisingly neat. Books were stacked on every available surface, and the walls were covered with photographs, landscapes mostly, taken on what looked like long motorcycle rides through various scenic routes. "You took these?" she asked, studying a particularly striking shot of a mountain road at sunset. "Yeah, photography's kind of a hobby, something peaceful to do between all the chaos." Jake emerged with eggs and bread. "You hungry for scrambled eggs?" "Fair warning, I'm not exactly a chef. Scrambled eggs sound perfect." As Jake cooked, Maya found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. There was something comfortable about the domestic simplicity of it all. No tension, no walking on eggshells, no cruel comments disguised as concern for her health. "So what did you do before all this?" Jake asked, sliding a plate of eggs in front of her. "I worked at a bookstore downtown. Nothing glamorous, but I loved it. I probably won't have a job to go back to after yesterday's drama." "Books, huh? That explains a lot." Jake gestured toward his collection. "What kind do you like?" "Everything, really. But I have a soft spot for stories where the underdog wins." Jake's laugh was warm and genuine. "Well, you're living in one now. Think we can pull off a happy ending?" Before Maya could answer, Jake's phone buzzed on the counter. His expression darkened as he read the message. "What is it?" "Text from an unknown number. Says they're your stepmother's lawyer. Apparently, there are some conditions to this marriage we weren't told about." Maya's stomach dropped. "What kind of conditions?" Jake read from the phone. "The marriage must be maintained for a minimum of 6 months to satisfy the terms of your father's will. Failure to comply results in forfeiture of all inheritance rights." He looked up at Maya. "Did you know about any inheritance?" Maya shook her head slowly. "My father died when I was 16. Margaret always said he left everything to her." "Looks like your stepmother's been lying about more than just this being a joke." Jake's jaw tightened. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Maya stared at the phone, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. 6 months. Her father's will. This wasn't just cruelty, it was calculated theft. "We're going to make her regret every lie she's ever told," Maya said quietly, surprising herself with the steel in her own voice. The morning sun streamed through Maya's bedroom window as she stared at her reflection, trying to process what had happened the night before. Her lips still tingled from Jake's kiss, and every time she thought about the way he'd looked at her, really looked at her, her heart did somersaults. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. "Maya, get down here. Now!" Victoria's voice cut through the house like a blade. Maya's stomach dropped. She'd managed to sneak in last night without confronting her stepmother, but clearly that reprieve was over. She made her way downstairs, finding Victoria pacing the living room like a caged predator, her phone clutched in her manicured hand. "Sit," Victoria commanded, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to discuss your little adventure last night." "I don't know what you mean," Maya said, though her voice betrayed her nervousness. Victoria's laugh was cold. "Don't play dumb with me. Mrs. Henderson saw you gallivanting around town with that criminal, on his motorcycle no less. Do you have any idea how this looks?" Maya felt a spark of defiance. "It looks like I was having dinner with my fiancé. Isn't that what you wanted?" "What I wanted," Victoria hissed, stepping closer, "was for you to understand your place. This arrangement wasn't meant to be some fairy tale romance, Maya. It was meant to teach you that actions have consequences." The words hit Maya like a slap. Consequences for what? For existing? For not being the perfect stepdaughter you never wanted? For being exactly what you are, Victoria snapped. A burden, an embarrassment. I thought pairing you with someone equally unsuitable would finally make you see reality. Maya stood up, her hands trembling. The only reality I see is that you're a miserable woman who can't stand the thought of anyone else being happy. Victoria's face flushed with rage, but before she could respond, the rumble of a motorcycle engine filled the air. Both women turned toward the window as Jake pulled into the driveway, looking effortlessly confident in his leather jacket and worn jeans. "He's here," Maya said, her heart lifting despite the confrontation. "Perfect," Victoria said, her tone shifting to something almost gleeful. "Time to put an end to this nonsense." Maya watched in horror as her stepmother marched toward the front door, flinging it open before Jake could even knock. "Mr. Morrison," Victoria said with false sweetness. "How convenient. We were just discussing you." Jake's eyes found Maya over Victoria's shoulder, and she saw concern flash across his face. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm here to pick up Maya. We have plans." "Oh, I'm sure you do," Victoria replied. "But first, I think there's something you should know about this little arrangement." "Victoria, don't—" Maya started, but her stepmother cut her off with a raised hand. "You see, Mr. Morrison, this engagement wasn't born out of any noble intentions. It was meant to be a lesson, a way to show my stepdaughter what happens when someone like her reaches above her station." Jake's expression didn't change, but Maya saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Victoria continued, emboldened by his silence. "I paired her with you because I assumed you were cut from the same cloth. Rough, unrefined, unsuitable. I never imagined you'd be foolish enough to actually develop feelings for her." The words hung in the air like poison. Maya felt her world cracking apart, shame and humiliation washing over her in waves. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and never face Jake again. But when she finally worked up the courage to look at him, what she saw wasn't disgust or disappointment. His dark eyes were fixed on Victoria with an intensity that made the older woman take a step back. "Are you finished?" Jake asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting this reaction. Well, yes. I thought you deserved to know the truth." Jake stepped past her into the house, his attention shifting entirely to Maya. "You ready to go, beautiful?" Maya stared at him in shock. "But didn't you hear what she said?" "I heard every word," Jake replied, reaching for her hand. "Doesn't change anything. Your stepmother's motivations don't change who you are or how I feel about you. But the whole thing was a setup, a cruel joke." Jake's thumb traced over her knuckles as he smiled. "Then I guess the joke's on her, because I'm not going anywhere." Victoria sputtered behind them. "This is ridiculous. You can't possibly—" "Lady," Jake said without turning around, "the only ridiculous thing here is that you're too bitter to recognize what an amazing person Maya is. That's your loss, not mine." He squeezed Maya's hand gently. "Come on, let's get out of here. I want to show you something." As they headed toward the door, Maya felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in years, she wasn't walking away in shame. She was walking towards something beautiful, hand in hand with someone who saw her worth even when she couldn't see it herself. The morning after their first real kiss, Lily found herself humming while scrambling eggs, something she hadn't done in years. Marcus emerged from the bathroom, hair still damp from his shower, and caught her swaying slightly to whatever melody was playing in her head. "Someone's in a good mood," he observed, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. The casual intimacy of it made her heart skip. "Maybe," she said, trying to sound nonchalant but failing miserably when he pressed a soft kiss to her neck. "Just maybe?" His breath tickled her ear. "Guess I'll have to work harder to convince you." "Don't," Marcus said quietly, his hand still on her waist. "I have to. If I don't answer, she'll just keep calling." Lily swiped to accept. "Hello, Victoria." "Lily, darling, I have wonderful news. I've arranged a little dinner party for tonight. Nothing fancy, just a few close friends who are simply dying to meet your husband." The way Victoria said the word made it sound like something distasteful she'd found on her shoe. "Tonight?" Lily's voice came out smaller than she intended. 7 sharp. "I do hope Marcus has something appropriate to wear. We wouldn't want him to feel out of place." The false sweetness in Victoria's voice was nauseating. Marcus plucked the phone from Lily's hand before she could protest. "We'll be there," he said simply, then hung up. "Marcus, you can't just—" "Can't just what?" "Stand up to your stepmother. Watch out for my wife." His eyes were serious now. "Lily, we're going to that dinner, And we're going to show those people exactly who we are. Together. The word wife sent a flutter through her chest, but anxiety quickly overwhelmed it. You don't understand. Victoria's friends they're cruel. They'll tear you apart just for sport. Baby. Marcus cupped her face in his hands. I've been dealing with people looking down on me my whole life. Rich people, poor people, everyone in between. You think some uptight dinner party is going to break me? It's not about you breaking. It's about... Lily struggled to find the words. They'll be horrible to both of us. They'll make comments about my weight, about how we look together, about... Let them. Marcus's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. Let them show everyone exactly who they really are, while we show them who we are. That evening, Lily stood in front of her bedroom mirror, having changed clothes 4 times. Nothing felt right. Everything was either too tight, too loose, too dressy, or too casual. She was on the verge of tears when Marcus appeared behind her in the reflection. He looked devastatingly handsome in dark jeans and a black button-down shirt that somehow made his tattoos look artistic rather than threatening. He'd left the top 2 buttons undone and rolled up his sleeves, striking the perfect balance between respectable and rebellious. You look beautiful, he said, and she almost laughed. I look like I'm trying too hard. You look like the woman I married, the woman I'm falling in love with. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither was quite ready to fully explore. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I got you something. Lily's heart stopped. Marcus, we don't need to. It's not what you think. Just open it. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm shaped like a motorcycle. It was quirky and sweet and perfectly them. I know we're not a real married couple, he said, fastening it around her wrist. But tonight we're a team. And I want you to remember that when things get ugly in there. The dinner party was exactly as awful as Lily had predicted. Victoria's friends were a collection of society wives and their husbands, all dripping with jewelry and judgment. The comments started the moment they walked through the door. Oh my, how interesting, one woman murmured, her eyes raking over Marcus's tattoos. And Lily, you look... well, another added with false brightness. But something strange happened as the evening wore on. Every snide comment bounced off Marcus like he was made of armor. When someone made a crack about his bike being parked next to their Bentleys, he just smiled and asked if they'd ever experienced real freedom. When they questioned his employment, he spoke passionately about his custom work with such expertise that even they had to respect it. Most importantly, he never let go of Lily's hand. Not once. When she started to shrink into herself during a particularly vicious exchange about letting oneself go after marriage, Marcus squeezed her fingers and launched into a story about teaching her to ride that made her sound adventurous and brave. By dessert, Lily realized something had shifted. She wasn't hiding anymore. The sound of Diesel's Harley rumbling to life in the driveway had become Rose's favorite alarm clock. 3 weeks into their strange arrangement, she found herself actually looking forward to their morning rides to the diner. What had started as reluctant compliance had slowly transformed into something that felt dangerously close to friendship. You're humming, Marcus observed as Rose tied her apron behind the counter. That's new. Rose's cheeks flushed pink. She hadn't realized she was doing it. Just in a good mood, I guess. Wouldn't have anything to do with your leather-clad chauffeur, would it? Marcus wiggled his eyebrows dramatically. Because I've got to say, watching him stare at you while you work is better than cable TV. He doesn't stare, Rose protested, then immediately contradicted herself by glancing toward Diesel's usual corner booth. He was indeed looking her way, and when their eyes met, he raised his coffee cup in a small salute that made her stomach flutter. Uh-huh, Marcus grinned. Honey, that man looks at you like you hung the moon and sprinkled it with powdered sugar. Rose busied herself wiping down already clean counters. We're just getting to know each other. That's what normal people do before they get married, right? Normal people also date, go to movies, hold hands. Marcus lowered his voice conspiratorially. When's the last time he actually touched you? The question hit Rose unexpectedly hard. The truth was, despite their growing ease with each other, Diesel maintained a careful physical distance. He'd help her on and off his bike, his hands steady and warm on her waist, but it never lasted more than a few seconds. Sometimes she caught him, starting to reach for her hand, only to pull back at the last moment. "We're taking things slow," she said, though the words felt hollow. Marcus was about to respond when the diner's bell chimed, and Patricia swept in like a storm cloud in designer clothes. Rose's good mood evaporated instantly. "There you are," Patricia announced loudly enough for the entire diner to hear. "I've been trying to call you all morning." Rose's phone had been deliberately turned off. "I've been working." Patricia's gaze swept the diner with obvious disdain before landing on Diesel's booth. Her smile turned predatory. "Perfect. We need to discuss wedding plans, and I'd love your fiancé's input." Before Rose could object, Patricia was already gliding toward Diesel's table, her heels clicking against the checkered floor like a countdown to disaster. "Mind if I join you?" Patricia didn't wait for an answer, sliding into the booth across from him. "We really should get better acquainted, considering you're marrying into the family." Diesel's expression remained carefully neutral, but Rose could see the tension in his shoulders. She grabbed the coffee pot and hurried over, hoping to minimize whatever damage her stepmother was planning. "Coffee, Patricia?" Rose's voice was strained. "No, thank you, dear. I was just telling your fiancé how excited I am about the wedding." Patricia's smile was all teeth. "I've been thinking we should have it at the country club. Make it a real event." "That's not necessary," Rose said quickly. "Nonsense. It's not every day my stepdaughter gets married." Patricia's tone dripped with false sweetness. "Though I suppose we'll need to find you something in a larger size. The sample dresses at the bridal salon only go up to a 14. Rose felt the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up her neck. Around them, the diner had gone conspicuously quiet, other patrons pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Diesel's coffee cup hit the table with a sharp clink. When he looked up at Patricia, his expression was so cold it could have frozen fire. "You know what I think?" His voice was deadly quiet. "I think Rose would look beautiful in whatever she chooses to wear. And I think our wedding should be whatever makes her happy, not whatever makes you feel important." Patricia's composure cracked slightly. "I was simply trying to help plan a nice celebration." "Were you?" Diesel leaned forward slightly. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're trying to embarrass your stepdaughter in front of a room full of people, which makes me wonder what kind of person does that to family." The silence in the diner was deafening. Patricia's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on an impressive purple. "I don't think I like your tone," she said icily, "and I don't think I care." Diesel stood up, throwing a 20 on the table. "Rose, you ready to go?" Rose nodded mutely, untying her apron with shaking hands. Marcus appeared at her elbow, taking it from her. "Take your time coming back," he murmured. "I've got this covered." As they walked toward the door, Rose could feel every eye in the place following them. Diesel's hand found the small of her back, a gentle but possessive gesture that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. Outside, the cool air hit her flushed cheeks like a benediction. For the first time in her life, someone had actually stood up for her. The morning sun filtered through the workshop's grimy windows as Lily arranged fresh wildflowers in a mason jar, placing it on the workbench where Jake was already elbow-deep in engine parts. She'd been bringing flowers every few days, a small gesture that somehow made the oil-stained space feel more like home. "You don't have to keep prettying up my mess," Jake said, without looking up from the motorcycle he was rebuilding, though his tone carried warmth rather than complaint. "I like it here," Lily replied, settling onto the old wooden stool she'd claimed as her own. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you eat actual food instead of whatever comes out of those vending machines." She unpacked the lunch she'd prepared. Sandwiches cut into triangles, homemade cookies still warm from the oven, and thermos of real coffee. Jake's hands stilled on the wrench as the aroma reached him. "Damn woman," he muttered, wiping his hands on a rag. "You're gonna spoil me. That's the plan." Their eyes met across the workbench, and that familiar flutter danced in Lily's chest. 3 weeks of marriage, and she still couldn't quite believe this was real. The easy conversation, the comfortable silences, the way Jake's face softened whenever he looked at her. "Got something to tell you," Jake said, accepting the sandwich she offered. "Marcus called this morning. There's a club gathering this Saturday. Barbecue, bikes, the whole 9 yards. He paused, studying her face. "Wives are invited. Expected, actually." Lily's stomach clenched. She'd met Marcus briefly, Jake's intimidating club president with scars running down one side of his face and eyes that seemed to see everything. The thought of facing an entire gathering of bikers and their partners made her mouth go dry. "They want to meet you properly," Jake continued, misreading her silence. "As my old lady." "Your what?" A flush crept up Jake's neck. "Sorry, club terminology. It means, well, it means you're mine, that you're under the club's protection." He set down his sandwich, suddenly serious. "Look, I know it sounds primitive, but it's important. These guys, they're my family. Have been since I was 18 and had nowhere else to go." Lily nodded slowly. She understood about complicated families, about finding belonging in unexpected places. "Will they accept me?" "Baby, if they don't, that's their loss." Jake's voice carried a fierce protectiveness that made her heart skip. "But they will, trust me." Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather, and Lily's nerves stretched thin as guitar strings. She'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on jeans and a simple blue blouse. Casual enough not to seem like she was trying too hard, nice enough to show respect. The club's property sprawled across several acres outside town, dominated by a low-slung building that served as their headquarters. Motorcycles lined the gravel lot like chrome and steel soldiers, and the air thrummed with classic rock and laughter. Jake's hand found hers as they walked toward the gathering, his thumb tracing reassuring circles across her knuckles. "Remember what I told you about Marcus's wife, Elena? She runs the kitchen like a general, but she's got the biggest heart you'll ever meet. And Tank's nickname doesn't match his personality," Lily recited, trying to calm herself with the details Jake had shared. "Right, he raises orchids and cries at commercials with puppies." Despite her nerves, Lily smiled. "You're making that up. Scout's honor. Though I was never actually a scout." Elena materialized before them as if summoned, a petite woman with silver-streaked hair and laugh lines around dark eyes. She looked Lily up and down with the assessing gaze of someone accustomed to taking measure quickly. "So you're the one who's got our boy eating regular meals," Elena said without preamble. "Good. He was getting too skinny." Jake snorted. "I was not." "Hush." Elena waved him away like a bothersome fly. "Go play with your motorcycles. I'm borrowing your wife." Before Lily could protest, she found herself swept into the organized chaos of the outdoor kitchen, handed an apron, and put to work cutting vegetables while Elena peppered her with questions that felt more like friendly interrogation than conversation. "How'd you two really meet? And don't give me that arranged marriage nonsense. I want the real story." Elena's knife stilled against the cutting board. "Well, shit. That's either the cruelest thing I've ever heard or the most romantic, depending on how you look at it. I'm still figuring that out myself. And Jake, how's he treating you?" Lily's smile came without conscious thought. "Like I matter." Elena's expression softened with understanding that went bone deep. "Honey, you just passed the only test that counts around here." The morning sun streamed through Jake's apartment windows as Lily stirred awake, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous night came flooding back: Victoria's vicious setup, the humiliation at the restaurant, and Jake's fierce protection of her. She turned to find him already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching her with those intense dark eyes that had become her refuge. "Sleep okay?" His voice was rough with morning, but gentle. "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted, surprised by the truth of it. Despite everything that had happened, being here with Jake felt like the safest place in the world. Jake's phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand. He ignored it the first few times, but when it rang again immediately after stopping, he grabbed it with an annoyed grunt. "What?" His tone was sharp until he heard the voice on the other end. His expression shifted to something Lily had never seen before, a mixture of pain and resignation. "Yeah, Ma, I know I said I'd—" He listened for a moment, his jaw tightening. "Tomorrow? That's not enough notice." Another pause. "Fine. Yeah, I'll be there." He hung up and stared at the phone for a long moment. "Everything okay?" Lily asked softly. Jake ran a hand through his dark hair. "My sister's getting married. Well, remarried. Third time's the charm, right?" His laugh held no humor. "Family dinner tomorrow to meet the new guy. That sounds—" Lily searched for the right words. "Complicated." "You could say that." Jake turned to face her fully. "My family's not exactly the warm and fuzzy type, more like controlled chaos with a side of judgment." He paused, studying her face. "I want you to come with me." Lily's eyes widened. "Jake, I don't think—" "I'm serious. I want them to meet you. I want them to see what real means." His voice carried a conviction that made her heart skip. "Unless you're not ready for that level of crazy." Before she could answer, Lily's own phone rang. Her stomach dropped when she saw her father's number. She considered letting it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. "Dad?" "Lily." Her father's voice sounded strained, older somehow. "We need to talk. Can you come home?" "I don't know if that's a good idea right now." "Please." "Victoria's—" "She's gone too far this time. I should have stopped this before it got out of hand." There was genuine regret in his voice. "I know I haven't been the father you deserved, especially after your mother died, but I want to make this right." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. It was the first time in years her father had acknowledged her mother's death as a turning point, the first time he'd admitted his failures as a parent. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll come over." After hanging up, she turned to Jake, who had been listening with obvious concern. "I have to go face the music," she said. "Not alone, you don't." Jake was already reaching for his clothes. "We're a team now, remember?" An hour later, they pulled up to her father's house on Jake's motorcycle. Lily had insisted on riding instead of driving separately, needing the comfort of holding on to Jake, of feeling his solid presence in front of her. As they walked up the familiar driveway, Jake took her hand, squeezing gently. Her father answered the door before they could knock. His face was drawn, and he looked like he'd aged years overnight. His eyes moved from Lily to Jake, taking in the leather jacket, the tattoos visible on Jake's arms, the protective way he stood beside his daughter. "Dad, this is Jake. My husband." The words still felt strange on her tongue, but saying it in front of her father, claiming it openly, felt like a small victory. Her father extended his hand to Jake, who shook it firmly. "I owe you an apology," he said to Jake. "And you a much bigger one," he added, looking at Lily. They settled in the living room, the same space where Victoria had gleefully announced the marriage arrangement weeks ago. Now it felt different, charged with possibility for honest conversation. Victoria left this morning. Her father began without preamble. Took most of her jewelry and clothes, left this behind. He handed Lily an envelope with her name on it. Inside was a check for a substantial amount of money and a note in Victoria's elaborate handwriting. "Consider this payment for services rendered. You played your part better than I expected." Lily stared at the check, then slowly tore it into pieces. "I never did it for money," she said quietly. "I did it because I thought it might finally make you proud of me." Her father's face crumpled. "Oh, sweetheart, you never needed to earn that. I was just too lost in my own grief to show you." Jake watched the exchange silently, his hand never leaving Lily's, anchoring her through the emotional turbulence. When she looked at him, she saw something that made her breath catch, not just love, but absolute certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as Maya hummed softly, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. She'd woken early, unable to sleep from excitement about their upcoming weekend plans. Jax had mentioned wanting to take her somewhere special, somewhere that meant something to him. The mystery of it made her heart flutter in ways she was still getting used to. "Smells incredible in here." Jax's gravelly morning voice made her turn, and she nearly dropped the spatula. His hair was tousled from sleep, and he wore nothing but low-slung jeans, his tattooed chest on full display. Even after weeks together, the sight of him still made her breath catch. "Good morning to you too," she laughed, trying to focus on the pancakes instead of the way his muscles moved as he stretched. "I thought we could have a proper breakfast before you whisk me away on this mysterious adventure." He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, pressing a kiss to her neck. "You're spoiling me, beautiful. I could get used to mornings like this." The domestic intimacy of it all still amazed Maya. How had she gone from being the invisible, unwanted stepdaughter to this? To being cherished and desired by someone who saw her as beautiful exactly as she was? She said, leaning back against his chest as she turned off the burner. "Are you going to tell me where we're going, or do I have to guess?" "Nice try," he chuckled, stealing a piece of bacon from the plate. "But you'll see soon enough. Just dress comfortably, and maybe bring a jacket. We'll be on the bike for a while." An hour later, they were cruising down the highway, Maya's arms wrapped securely around Jax's waist. She'd grown to love these rides, the way the world opened up around them, the feeling of freedom that came with the wind and the road. But as they turned off onto increasingly rural roads, her curiosity intensified. When they finally stopped, Maya looked around in confusion. They were at what appeared to be an old, run-down garage on the outskirts of town. The building looked abandoned, with weeds growing through cracks in the pavement and rust eating away at the metal siding. "Jax?" she questioned, removing her helmet as he killed the engine. "Come on," he said, his voice carrying an emotion she couldn't quite identify. "There's something I want to show you, something I've never shown anyone else." He led her around to the back of the building, producing a key from his pocket. The door opened with a protesting creak, and Jax flicked on a battery-powered lantern, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Maya gasped. The space was transformed from what she'd expected. Instead of auto parts and grease, she found herself in what could only be described as an artist's workshop. Welding equipment sat alongside delicate metalworking tools, and the walls were lined with the most beautiful sculptures she'd ever seen. "You made these?" she whispered, moving closer to examine a piece that looked like wind given form, all flowing curves and graceful lines. Jax nodded, suddenly looking vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "Started coming here when I was 16. Old Murphy, who owned the place, let me use the space in exchange for odd jobs. After he died, his nephew didn't want it, so I made him an offer he couldn't refuse." Maya turned slowly, taking in piece after piece. Each sculpture was unique, some abstract, others representing natural forms, birds in flight, trees bending in wind, water flowing over stones. All of them created with a sensitivity and skill that took her breath away. "Jax, these are incredible," she said, her voice filled with awe. "You're an artist, a real artist." He shrugged, but she could see the pleasure her words brought him. "Nobody knows. Not even the guys from the club. They think I disappear out here to work on bikes or deal with other business. But why keep it secret? These are beautiful. People should see them." "Because," he said quietly, running his hand through his hair, "guys like me aren't supposed to create beautiful things. We're supposed to destroy them. It doesn't fit the image." Maya's heart ached for him. She understood better than most what it felt like to hide parts of yourself because they didn't fit what others expected. Moving closer, she took his hands in hers, feeling the calluses that came from both his rougher work and these delicate creations. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what? For trusting me with this? For showing me who you really are?" He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "You're the first person who's ever made me want to show all my sides, Maya, the good, the bad, and everything in between." When he kissed her, surrounded by the evidence of his hidden artistic soul, Maya felt something shift between them. This wasn't just attraction or even love anymore. This was true intimacy, the kind that came from seeing and accepting every part of each other. As they broke apart, both breathing heavily, Maya knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, secrets shared and walls finally down. The diner buzzed with the usual morning crowd, but Maya barely noticed the clatter of dishes or the hum of conversation. She moved through her shift on autopilot, refilling coffee cups and taking orders while her mind replayed the conversation with her father from 3 days ago. The word annulment kept echoing in her head like a broken record. "You okay, hun?" Betty, the head waitress, touched her shoulder gently. "You've been pouring that coffee for about 30 seconds too long." Maya blinked, realizing she'd nearly overflowed Mrs. Henderson's cup. "Sorry, just distracted. That husband of yours pick up extra shifts at the garage? Haven't seen his bike out front lately." The innocent question hit Maya like a physical blow. She mumbled something non-committal and escaped to the kitchen, her throat tight with unshed tears. How could she explain that Jake was avoiding her? That ever since her father's ultimatum, something had shifted between them, creating a chasm she didn't know how to bridge. The bell above the diner door chimed, and Maya's heart leaped, hoping it might be Jake. Instead, she watched through the service window as her stepsister Clarissa glided in wearing a pristine white sundress that probably cost more than Maya's monthly salary. "Well, well." Clarissa slid onto a stool at the counter, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the formica surface. "How's married life treating you, dear sister?" Maya forced herself to approach the counter, notepad in hand. "What can I get you?" "Oh, I think we both know I'm not here for the food." Clarissa's smile was sharp as a blade. Mother's been beside herself with worry. "You haven't returned any of her calls." "I've been busy." Yes. Playing house with your delinquent husband. Though from what I hear around town, that's not going so well either." Clarissa leaned forward conspiratorially. "Trouble in paradise?" Maya's grip tightened on her pen. "I don't know what you mean." "Jake hasn't been seen at your little apartment for days. His bike's been parked at the Rusty Anchor every night. You know, that dive bar where all the bikers drink away their problems?" Clarissa examined her nails with practiced indifference. "Of course, if you ever get tired of pretending this joke of a marriage is real, Daddy's lawyer drew up some papers that would make everything go away very quietly." The pen snapped in Maya's grip. "Get out. I'm just trying to help. Get out." Maya's voice carried across the diner, drawing stares from other customers. Clarissa stood smoothly, her expression triumphant. "When you're ready to stop this charade and come home where you belong, you know where to find us." After Clarissa left, Maya locked herself in the diner's tiny bathroom and finally let the tears fall. Everything was crumbling. Her marriage, her newfound confidence, her dreams of something real with Jake, it was all slipping through her fingers like sand. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. When closing time came, Maya found herself walking the long way home, dreading the empty apartment that awaited her. The summer evening was warm and golden, couples strolling hand in hand down the sidewalk, their laughter a painful reminder of what she'd lost. She turned the corner onto her street and stopped dead. Jake's Harley sat in its usual spot outside their building, chrome gleaming in the fading sunlight. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she climbed the stairs, key trembling in her hand. Jake stood at the kitchen window, his back to her when she entered. He'd changed out of his usual leather jacket into a simple black t-shirt that stretched across his broad shoulders. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Clarissa came by the diner today," Maya said finally, setting her purse on the small table by the door. "Yeah?" His voice was carefully neutral. "She said you've been staying at the Rusty Anchor." Jake turned slowly, and Maya's breath caught at the exhaustion etched in his features. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and several days' worth of stubble covered his jaw. He looked like a man wrestling with demons. "Been doing some thinking," he said quietly. "About the annulment?" My father doesn't get to decide what I want." The words came out fiercer than Maya intended, surprising them both. Something flickered in Jake's eyes. Hope, maybe, or fear. "And what do you want, Maya?" The question was simple, but the weight of it settled over her like a blanket. Everything hung in the balance. Their marriage, their future, the fragile love they'd built together. Maya looked at this man who'd changed everything about how she saw herself, who'd made her feel beautiful and wanted and worthy of love. "I want you to come home," she whispered. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of their small apartment as Maya stirred awake, finding Jake's arm wrapped protectively around her waist. 3 months had passed since their wedding, and each day felt like discovering a new piece of herself she'd forgotten existed. The cruel laughter from her stepfamily seemed like an echo from another lifetime. "Morning, beautiful," Jake murmured against her neck, his voice rough with sleep. Maya smiled, still marveling at how easily those words fell from his lips, how genuinely he meant them. "We need to get up. Diesel's expecting us at the garage by 10, and you promised to help with the charity ride planning." Jake groaned dramatically, pulling her closer. 5 more minutes. The bikes aren't going anywhere. Their peaceful moment shattered when Maya's phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand. The caller ID made her stomach drop, Victoria. "Don't answer it," Jake said, reading her expression. But Maya had already swiped to accept. Her stepmother's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp and venomous as always. Well, I heard through the grapevine that you're still playing house with that criminal. I have to admit, Maya, I'm impressed by your commitment to this charade." "It's not a charade, Victoria." Maya sat up straighter, Jake's hand finding hers for support. "Oh, please, do you honestly think this will last? A man like that? He's probably already planning his exit strategy. Men don't stay with women like you, darling. They use you and move on to someone prettier, thinner, more—" Jake plucked the phone from Maya's hand. "This is Jake, Maya's husband, and you're going to listen very carefully because I'm only going to say this once." Maya held her breath, watching Jake's jaw tighten. "Maya is the most incredible woman I've ever known. She's beautiful, brilliant, and kind, qualities you clearly wouldn't recognize. You had your chance to be part of her life, and you chose to be cruel instead. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop calling, stop poisoning her thoughts, and stay out of our marriage. Because if I hear you've upset my wife again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation." He ended the call and immediately blocked the number, his hands gentle as he cupped Maya's face. "She's wrong about everything, you know that, right?" Maya nodded, though Victoria's words still stung. "I know, it's just hard sometimes, hearing that voice in my head. Then let me give you a different voice to hear." That afternoon at the garage, Maya found herself surrounded by Jake's chosen family. Diesel was explaining the route for their upcoming charity ride to benefit the local children's hospital, while his wife Sarah spread maps across the workbench. Tank and his girlfriend were arguing good-naturedly about which restaurants to include as stops. "Maya, what do you think about adding the park near 5th Street?" Sarah asked. "Perfect photo opportunity for the kids." Maya studied the map, tracing the route with her finger. "What if we loop through downtown instead? There's that new ice cream shop that just opened. They might donate treats for the kids." "Brilliant," Diesel boomed. "See, this is why we needed a brain in this operation." Tank laughed. "Jake's been bragging about marrying up, intellectually speaking." "Damn right I did," Jake called from under a motorcycle, his voice muffled but proud. Maya felt warmth spread through her chest. This was what family felt like: support, inclusion, genuine affection. Not the constant criticism and belittlement she'd grown up with. Later, as Jake worked on his bike, Maya wandered over to where a young mother was waiting with her son, maybe 8 years old. The boy was staring at Jake's tattoos with wide-eyed fascination. "Very real," she confirmed with a smile. "Do they hurt?" "Only for a little while. Then they become part of your story." Jake caught the end of the conversation and rolled out from under the bike, grinning. "Want to see the coolest one?" He showed the boy the intricate phoenix tattoo on his shoulder, explaining how the mythical bird rose from ashes to become something stronger and more beautiful. Like when I broke my arm, but then it got better and stronger than before? The boy asked. Exactly like that, buddy. Driving home that evening, Maya reflected on the day's contrasts. Victoria's poison versus the warmth of Jake's friends, criticism versus acceptance, fear versus love. Penny for your thoughts, Jake said, reaching over to squeeze her knee. Just thinking about phoenixes, Maya replied. How sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. Jake pulled into their driveway and turned to face her fully. You know what I love most about you? What? You see the magic in everything, even in us. He leaned over to kiss her softly, especially in us. As they walked inside together, Maya realized that Victoria had been right about one thing. This wasn't the life anyone had planned for her. It was so much better. The garage had never looked more beautiful. What started as Maya's simple suggestion to host their engagement party there had transformed into something magical, thanks to the combined efforts of both their families. Well, the family that mattered. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting a warm golden glow over the polished concrete floors. Wildflowers in mason jars adorned every surface, and the scent of barbecue drifted from the back lot where Jake's crew had set up an impressive spread. Maya stood in the doorway, smoothing down her flowing emerald dress, one she'd chosen herself, one that made her feel radiant. The past few months had been a whirlwind of planning, legal meetings with lawyers about her inheritance, and slowly building a relationship with her father's sister, Aunt Carol, who had tearfully apologized for losing touch after the funeral. You clean up nice, princess. Jake's voice rumbled behind her, his arms sliding around her waist. She leaned back against his chest, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. Not too bad yourself, handsome. She turned in his arms to admire him in his crisp button-down and dark jeans, his hair neatly trimmed but still maintaining that rakish charm that made her heart skip. Ready for this circus? With you? I'm ready for anything. The guests began arriving in waves. Jake's motorcycle club rolled up first, their bikes gleaming in the afternoon sun, but today they came bearing gifts and genuine smiles instead of their usual intimidating presence. Maya had grown fond of these rough-around-the-edges men who treated her like precious cargo and called her their club princess. Her college friends arrived next, still somewhat bewildered by this turn in her life but undeniably supportive. Jessica pulled her aside almost immediately. Maya, I have to ask, are you absolutely certain about all this? I mean, 6 months ago you were planning to be a spinster librarian, and now you're marrying a biker and running your own business? Maya glanced across the garage, where Jake was deep in conversation with Dr. Martinez, who had surprised everyone by showing up in leather pants and boots, looking nothing like the buttoned-up therapist they'd both been seeing. Jess, 6 months ago I thought I knew what my life would be. Small, quiet, invisible. But you know what I learned? Sometimes the universe has bigger plans than the ones we make for ourselves. The flower arrangements are simply divine. Aunt Carol's voice carried across the space as she examined Maya's handiwork. Her father's sister had turned out to be everything Maya had hoped for in family, warm, accepting, and appropriately horrified by the stories of Eleanor's treatment. You've really found your calling, dear. Maya's small floral arrangement business had taken off faster than she'd ever imagined. Word of mouth from their wedding clients had led to more bookings, and she'd recently hired 2 part-time assistants. The financial independence felt almost as good as Jake's arms around her. Speaking of Eleanor, her conspicuous absence spoke volumes. After the reading of Maya's father's will, which had revealed substantial assets hidden from his daughter, now rightfully hers, Eleanor had made several attempts at reconciliation. Maya's polite but firm rejections had apparently gotten through because the calls had stopped coming. Speech, speech, Tommy called out, raising his beer bottle. The garage fell quiet as all eyes turned to the happy couple. Jake grabbed Maya's hand, pulling her up onto a makeshift platform they'd built from old crates. Most of you know I'm not much for pretty words, he began, his voice carrying easily through the space. But this woman here, she's taught me that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as the worst. Maya felt tears prick her eyes as he continued. 6 months ago, I thought I was doing someone a favor, going along with what seemed like a bad joke. Turns out, the joke was on me, because I fell so hard and so fast for this incredible, beautiful, strong woman that I didn't know what hit me. He turned to face her fully. Maya, you saved me in ways I'm still figuring out. You made me want to be better, do better, love better. And somehow you convinced me I was worthy of being loved back. The garage erupted in cheers and applause, but Maya barely heard it over the sound of her own heartbeat. She stood on her tiptoes to kiss him, tasting salt from tears she didn't realize she'd been crying. My turn, she said, accepting the beer bottle Tommy offered as a makeshift microphone. Jake Moretti, you beautiful disaster of a man. You showed me that love isn't about fitting into someone else's idea of perfect. It's about finding someone who thinks your imperfections are perfect for them. More cheers, more tears, and somewhere in the background, the opening chords of their song began playing from the sound system. Jake swept her down from the platform and into his arms, spinning her around as their friends and chosen family celebrated around them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new opportunities to choose love over fear. But tonight, in this garage full of motor oil and magic, surrounded by people who loved them exactly as they were, Maya knew she was exactly where she belonged. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as Maya stood at the stove, humming softly while scrambling eggs. 3 months of marriage had settled into a rhythm she never thought possible, comfortable, warm, and filled with laughter that echoed through their small apartment. The scent of coffee mingled with bacon, creating the kind of domestic bliss that would have seemed like a fantasy just months ago. Smells incredible in here. Jake's voice rumbled behind her as strong arms wrapped around her waist. His beard tickled her neck as he pressed a kiss to her shoulder, and she melted back against his chest. Don't distract the chef, she teased, but leaned into his embrace anyway. Your eggs will burn. Wouldn't be the first time, he chuckled, remembering her early attempts at cooking that had resulted in several smoke alarm incidents. Maya was about to respond with a witty comeback when her phone buzzed insistently on the counter. The caller ID made her stomach clench, her father's office number. She hadn't spoken to him since the wedding, when he'd stood awkwardly beside Vivian, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to stand up to his wife. You don't have to answer it, Jake said quietly, sensing her hesitation. But something in her chest had shifted these past months. Jake's unwavering love had built a foundation of confidence she'd never possessed before. She picked up the phone. Maya? Her father's voice sounded strained, older somehow. Could you come to the house? There's something I need to discuss with you. It's about Vivian. An hour later, they pulled up to the imposing colonial house where Maya had spent so many miserable years. Jake's motorcycle looked defiant, parked next to her father's luxury sedan, and she drew strength from the contrast. Her father answered the door himself, which was unusual. His face was haggard, and Maya noticed grey streaks in his hair that hadn't been there before. Maya, thank you for coming. Jake. He nodded respectfully to her husband, and Maya caught the surprise in Jake's eyes at the genuine courtesy. They followed him into the living room, where Maya had endured countless lectures about her appearance, her failures, her inadequacies. But today, with Jake's hand steady in hers, the room had lost its power to intimidate her. "Where's Vivian?" Maya asked, settling onto the couch beside Jake. Her father's face crumpled slightly. "That's what I need to tell you. She's left, Maya. Filed for divorce last week." Maya blinked, processing this information. "I don't understand." "Her plan backfired spectacularly," her father continued, his voice heavy with something that might have been shame. "She arranged your marriage, expecting it to be a disaster, expecting you to come crawling back humiliated. When it became clear that you were genuinely happy, that Jake was a good man who loved you." He paused, looking directly at his daughter for the first time in years. "She couldn't stand it. couldn't stand that her cruelty had somehow led to your happiness. Jake's grip tightened on Maya's hand, and she could feel the tension radiating from him. But when he spoke, his voice was controlled. So she left because Maya found happiness? She was furious that her plan to hurt Maya had backfired so completely. She'd been telling people what she'd done, expecting sympathy, expecting them to laugh along with her. Instead, everyone was horrified. She became a social pariah. Her father ran a hand through his hair. But that's not why I called you here. He stood and walked to his desk, returning with a thick envelope. This is yours, Maya, your mother's trust fund. Vivian convinced me to withhold it, claiming you weren't mature enough to handle the inheritance. But you were supposed to receive it on your wedding day. Maya stared at the envelope as if it might bite her. How much? $200,000. The number hung in the air like a tangible thing. Jake whistled low under his breath. I know it doesn't make up for the years of... her father began. No, Maya interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. It doesn't. But this isn't about the money, Dad. This is about the fact that you let her treat me like that for years. You stood by and watched. Her father's shoulders sagged. You're right, I was a coward. I failed you as a father, and I failed your mother's memory. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I see it now. I see how wrong I was. Maya looked at Jake, whose eyes held nothing but support for whatever decision she made. She thought about the scared, lonely girl who had walked into that courthouse months ago, certain she was being sacrificed to her stepmother's cruelty. That girl would have craved this apology, would have given anything for her father's acknowledgement. But the woman she'd become, strengthened by love and partnership, needed something different. I'll take the money, she said finally. It was my mother's, and it belongs to me. But Dad, this doesn't erase anything. If you want a relationship, with me, with us, you'll have to earn it. The courthouse steps felt surreal beneath Maya's feet as she clutched the marriage certificate, the ink still wet from their signatures. Jake's arm wrapped protectively around her waist, his leather jacket a stark contrast to her simple white dress, the one her grandmother had worn decades ago, carefully preserved and finally given purpose. I can't believe we actually did it, Maya whispered, her voice catching between laughter and tears. The small ceremony had been perfect in its simplicity, just them, the justice of the peace, and Jake's best friend Tommy as their witness. No cruel stepmother, no sneering commentary, no forced audience to witness what Vivian had intended as Maya's ultimate humiliation. Jake pressed his lips to her temple, his voice rough with emotion. Best decision I ever made, Mrs. Morrison. The sound of her new name sent butterflies dancing through her stomach. Mrs. Morrison. She'd never thought she'd want to take anyone's name, but hearing it from Jake's lips felt like coming home. Tommy whooped from behind them, nearly dropping his camera. Come on, you two lovebirds. We need pictures for the Wall of Fame at the garage. The guys aren't going to believe their eyes when they see Jake in an actual tie. Jake groaned, tugging at the navy blue necktie that Maya had insisted he wear. This thing's trying to strangle me. How do office guys survive? Quit complaining, Maya laughed, straightening the tie with gentle fingers. You look incredibly handsome, very distinguished. Distinguished? Jake raised an eyebrow, his trademark smirk appearing. Lady, you married a grease monkey who's been in more bar fights than board meetings. I married the man who sees me, Maya said softly, her hand coming up to trace the line of his jaw. The man who makes me laugh until my sides hurt and who holds me when the world feels too heavy. The tender moment was interrupted by the rumble of motorcycles pulling up to the courthouse. Maya's eyes widened as she watched Jake's entire crew from the garage dismount their bikes, all of them cleaned up and carrying what appeared to be hastily gathered flowers from various gas stations and convenience stores. Surprise! Razor called out, his weathered face split by an enormous grin. You didn't think we'd miss the boss's wedding, did you? Maya felt tears spring to her eyes as the rough-looking bikers approached with surprising gentleness, each one offering congratulations and their makeshift bouquets. These men, who society would cross the street to avoid, had become her unexpected family over the past months. "How did you—" Jake started, clearly moved. "Tommy texted us the courthouse info," Big Mike explained, his voice uncharacteristically emotional. "Maya's good people, Jake. She makes the best coffee this side of heaven and actually listens when we talk about our kids. Plus, she's the only one brave enough to tell you when you're being an idiot," added Spike, earning chuckles from the group. The impromptu celebration moved to Mickey's Diner, where the owner had somehow procured a small wedding cake on impossibly short notice. Maya suspected Jake had called ahead, but when she questioned him with raised eyebrows, he just winked and claimed ignorance. As they sat in the corner booth that had become their regular spot, surrounded by the unlikely wedding party of leather-clad bikers sharing cake and terrible jokes, Maya's phone buzzed. Her stomach dropped when she saw Vivian's name on the screen. Jake noticed her expression immediately. "What is it?" Maya showed him the text, "Heard through the grapevine about your little courthouse ceremony. How pathetic. Even you couldn't manage a real wedding." Before Maya could respond, Jake gently took the phone from her hands and deleted the message. "Today isn't about her, darling. Today is about us. But she—" "She what? Disapproves?" Jake's laugh was genuine and warm. "The woman who tried to auction you off to the highest bidder thinks our wedding was pathetic? I call that a ringing endorsement." Maya stared at him, then burst into laughter. "When you put it that way—" "Besides," Jake continued, gesturing around the diner at their celebrating friends, "look around. We've got everything that matters. People who love us, terrible diner coffee, and the world's most questionable wedding cake." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that never failed to make her pulse race. "And I get to take you home tonight as my wife." The word wife sent warmth spreading through Maya's chest. 6 months ago, she'd been resigned to a life of quiet resignation, accepting whatever scraps the world offered. Now she was married to a man who looked at her like she hung the stars, surrounded by friends who'd chosen to become family. "No regrets?" Jake asked softly, his thumb tracing circles on her hand. Maya looked around the diner, at the mismatched group of bikers arguing over whether the cake was vanilla or white chocolate, at the man whose love had changed everything about how she saw herself and her place in the world. "Not a single one," she whispered, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like freedom and forever. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows of their new home, casting golden light across the counter where Maya stood making coffee. 6 months had passed since their courthouse wedding, and life had settled into a rhythm she'd never imagined possible. The house they'd bought together was small but perfect. A cozy cottage with a garden where she could grow her herbs and vegetables, and a garage where Jake could work on his bikes. She heard the rumble of his Harley pulling into the driveway and smiled. He'd been out early on a supply run for the garage, which was finally turning a real profit. The legitimate business had grown beyond their wildest expectations, with customers coming from 3 counties over for Jake's custom work. The front door opened with a bang, followed by Jake's voice booming through the house. "Maya, you'll never guess what just happened." She turned as he burst into the kitchen, his face lit up with excitement and something else she couldn't quite identify. In his hands was a large manila envelope. "What's got you so worked up?" she asked, reaching up to kiss his cheek. Even after all these months, the casual intimacy still sent little thrills through her. "Remember that bike magazine that came by last month? The one that took all those photos?" Jake's hands were actually shaking as he held the envelope. "Of course. You were convinced they were just humoring us." "Well, they weren't." He thrust the envelope at her. "Open it." Maya's eyebrows rose at his unusual nervousness. She carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a glossy magazine. Her breath caught in her throat. There, on the cover, was one of Jake's custom bikes, a stunning piece he'd built for a collector in Nashville. The headline read, "Underground Genius, the small-town shop creating tomorrow's classics." "Jake," she whispered, flipping to the feature article. Page after page showcased his work, with quotes from satisfied customers and industry experts praising his innovative designs. "There's more," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "They want to do a documentary, and there's already been 3 calls this morning from collectors wanting custom builds." Maya looked up at him, seeing the wonder in his eyes. This was the man everyone had written off as nothing but trouble, the dangerous biker her stepmother had chosen specifically to humiliate her. Now he was being celebrated for his artistry and craftsmanship. "I'm so proud of you," she said softly. "We did this together," he replied, pulling her close. "None of this would have happened without you believing in me." Before she could respond, her phone rang. Jake groaned good-naturedly. "If that's another reporter, I'm hiding in the garage." Maya glanced at the caller ID and her expression shifted. "It's my father." They'd had limited contact since the wedding. Her father had made tentative overtures toward reconciliation, especially after Diane's true nature had been fully exposed during their bitter divorce proceedings. "Maya?" Her father's voice was hesitant when she answered. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "No, it's fine. What's up, Dad? I saw the magazine article about Jake. I wanted to call and say congratulations. The work is really extraordinary." Maya felt Jake's arm tighten around her waist. "I'll tell him you said so." "Actually, I was hoping I could tell him myself. Would you both be willing to have dinner this weekend? I know I have a lot to make up for, and I'd like to try." Maya looked up at Jake, who nodded without hesitation. "We'd like that, Dad." After she hung up, Jake was quiet for a moment. "You okay with this?" "Yeah," she said, surprised to find she meant it. "I think I am. People change. People grow." "Speaking of growing," Jake said with a mischievous grin, "I have one more surprise." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Maya's heart stopped. "Jake, we're already married." "I know," he said, dropping to one knee right there in their sunny kitchen. "But we never did this right. You deserve the proposal, the romance, the choice made out of love instead of spite." He opened the box to reveal a simple, beautiful ring with a stone that caught the morning light. "Maya, will you marry me again? This time just because we're crazy about each other?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, you ridiculous man. Yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Maya thought about the strange journey that had brought them here. What had started as her stepmother's cruelest joke had become the greatest gift of her life. Later that evening, as they sat on their porch swing watching the sunset, Jake's arms around her and their future stretching bright before them, Maya finally understood what her grandmother had always told her. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, and sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and loving deeply. The cruel stepmother's plan had backfired spectacularly, creating not humiliation, but happiness beyond measure.